pluribus unum, out of many, one. We don't need more heat, we need more light. This is the moment. This is our time. We will change the course of history. It's the same partisan spectacle that only hardens the disdain many Americans have towards their own government. The time for bickering is over. We are better than this.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous
consent
to revise my remarks.
I object.
I object.
I object. Both sides of
I object.
the aisle.
I object.
Object.
And the hardest thing to change in politics is a stubborn status quo. But you can't give in to that cynicism. Do not let them win. Don't get cynical. It's one of the few regrets of my presidency that the rancor and suspicion between the parties has gotten worse instead of better. But for my final address to this chamber,
See how the divide in Washington is growing, why the president said he cannot deliver the change he promised, and how it's fueling this.
What the hell are you doing out here?
Standing with my brothers and sisters, man.
We'll take you inside that armed protest in Oregon and reveal how the anti-government militiamen are getting government assistance.
What do you say to the people watching? They know you. That you're a nut.
Plus, we have changes in the war on terror, more blunders in Tallahassee, and we'll have some fun with our own State of the Show address. This is Money, Power, and Politics. Hello, I'm Craig Patrick. You're about to see a different side to those armed militiamen in Oregon. But we start with the dysfunction in Washington and frustration all across the nation. It's driving this wild year in politics. And to understand what's behind it, you have to look back at where we've been and one of the president's biggest regrets.
my presence on this stage is pretty unlikely.
12 years ago, a self-described skinny kid with a funny name came out of nowhere with a call for unity.
There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America.
But now President Obama admits that we're more divided than we were before.
It's one of the few regrets of my presidency that the rancor and suspicion between the parties has gotten worse instead of better.
How did that happen?
You just be quiet.
Well, at least three things polarized our nation. First, the growing influence of money in politics pulled our federal lawmakers apart. They spent more time raising money elsewhere and less time getting to know one another in Washington, and gridlock set in.
Career politicians, they're like pigs feeding at the trough.
Then, number two, voters overcorrected. As they tried to run the pigs from the trough, they pushed out experienced deal makers and replaced them with mavericks who promised change.
We will not compromise.
But the more they promised, the less they changed, and the art of compromise was lost. Both parties lost one of their wings along the way and pulled to the right and to the left. And that brings us to the third big thing that divided us.
In America, you have a right to be stupid.
Only in America can an exit strategy involve misspelling every word on a road sign but exit. And the dysfunction in Washington has produced blunders that make our government look divided and foolish.
Since I'm in charge, obviously we screwed it up.
And with all the problems that have come to light within the bureaucracy and all of the bickering in plain view, faith in our government is near an all-time low. This naturally breeds distrust and anger that we see here in Florida in state and federal government.
Vote these people out.
That same frustration with dysfunction and stupidity that we see in government is currently fueling outsiders in the presidential race, and Trump in particular, and all the antics that go with it. But it's no laughing matter. Beyond the theater on the campaign trail, distrust in government has triggered protests across the nation, from the left and from the right. And over the past couple of weeks, it drove this armed protest in Oregon. The president once said there are no red states or blue states, but research shows the American people have shifted more to the left and more to the right. And they see our government as failing us. And President Obama says he cannot fix it as he once hoped, because real hope and change must come from within.
It's not enough just to change a congressman or change a senator or even change a president.
You watch a sonogram at a 15-week baby, and they have movements that are purposeful. If they're a male baby, they may have their hand between their legs. I mean, they feel pleasure.
I asked the chair, you know what this is? It's a snowball, and that's just from outside here. So it's very, very cold out, very unseasonal. So here, Mr. President, catch this.
You can believe NASA, or you can believe the senator
with the snowball.
Yeah, absolutely.
The more you drink, the more this will make sense to you.
You're stupid.
So many are demanding change at the ballot box, but others are going far beyond that, which brings us to the militiamen with guns in Eastern Oregon. It's been 2 weeks since they occupied a federal wildlife refuge, and now we have an exclusive behind-the-scenes look at who they are and what they're really thinking. Here's The Americans with Charlie LeDuff.
They say cowboys don't cry, but sometimes militiamen do. Here's a selfie the Kardashians could be proud of.
Your daddy swore an oath. He swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution. Against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And that's why he couldn't be with you on Christmas.
A month before his carpool confessional, John Ritzheimer had never heard of this dreary little patch of bird preserve high in the Oregon desert. But today, he's prepared to die for it.
What do you
That's
say
the point.
to the people watching? They know that you're a nut.
Well, all they need to do is...
If they think they know me from social media, they don't know me.
Are you dangerous?
No, I'm not dangerous. But
dangerous to those that would infringe on people's rights and
then yeah,
threaten the people with violence, absolutely.
Then I become very dangerous.
Many of the anti-government militiamen don't work. They've got government loans and disability checks, and their women are back in the big cities bringing home the bacon while they're up in the wilds playing soldier.
It's our federal government.
But you're not a citizen of the state. Who asked you to come?
People are in distress here. People are in distress here. Help your neighbor.
To what point? When do you go? They don't see the town. Some people do support
when they don't
you,
need
some
help.
don't.
When they don't need help. When they don't need help being lifted up back off the ground from being trampled by this federal government.
When do you determine that to be the case?
We'll see it.
To demonstrate the incapacity of the federal government.
To be clear, there's no love for the federal government here in rural Oregon. 2 ranchers were sent to prison for setting fire to federal lands. Nevertheless, the townfolk here want their uninvited occupiers to take their guns and go home.
I'm asking, as a sheriff of Harney County, that the people that are occupying our wildlife refuge go home.
But dude, everybody's mad at the government. Everybody in the country's mad at the government. Why are you gonna pick wait, let me ask. Everybody's mad at the government. Why are you gonna pick up a gun and point it at your brother?
I didn't point it at my brother.
But it could come to that.
I didn't point it at my brother.
But it could come to that. You know what I mean? That's what's going down.
I didn't point it at my brother. I have not pointed a gun at anybody
But
yet.
you might.
If it's pointed at me.
A right-wing extremist occupation of unemployed men doesn't pay for itself. Supporters trickle in from Alabama and Michigan, bringing cash and clean socks and coffee creamer. There's a lot of angry people in America.
What the hell are you doing out here? Standing with my brothers and sisters, man. This is not just this fight, man, but a fight for all corruptness in the government, man.
So you're just, it ain't really about ranching rights, you're just sick of the government?
Sick of the government and the corruption in the government.
None of the occupiers we met in Oregon were actually from Oregon. In fact, leader Ammon Bundy is a mechanic from Phoenix. And a few of his lieutenants have been exposed by the media as fake war vets. Some of the men here actually did serve in Iraq, and they seem to have come home, found nothing much to do except sit around and fume.
The veteran, naturally, he questions himself. He goes, what was I doing? Why are my friends dead? Why are my brothers underground? Because we were around the world fighting these unconstitutional wars, when the work for freedom and liberty is right here in our own backyard.
Explain that your point has been made and leave in a peaceful, honorable fashion.
The townfolk sent Bundy and his army a letter asking them to leave. Later in the day, the Idaho militia arrives with heavy firepower. Hell breaks loose. Who's in charge here, soldier? A press conference is quickly convened. It's got a decidedly blue-collar vibe.
to come here and with all your guns, and we don't need that, we don't want it, and, you know, we're asking you to leave.
That's a change.
Well, is it a welcome change?
And cut! With the town turning against him and the feds camped in town, Ammon Bundy struggles to find a graceful way out.
I think what's happening here needs to happen a little longer.
What happens to you if it lasts long? Are you worried?
No, I'm not worried. No, we didn't come in here for our own safety. We came in here to help our neighbors out and help our brothers out.
So half say stay, half say go, or thanks?
Yeah, it seems like the case, but most of them are saying thank you now. That's a good start.
So that's one way to start.
Yeah, that's one way to start.
Getting your ass out of here. Home soon, hopefully?
Oh, yeah. Peacefully. No bloodshed. America, that's what I love about this, is I think America, hey, this is great. We're civilized enough to where we don't need to have bloodshed in order for change to come about.
Maybe, Johnny, but remember, you're the one who brought the guns.
Okay, Charlie, you said some of the anti-government militiamen depend on government checks. Did they see any contradiction in that, and if so, how do they square it?
You know what? They don't, because they're not talking about what they deserve. What they're talking about is what you need. They seem to think they're fighting for you even though you're not asking it. So they say there's a bigger mission here, and it's not worrying about my family, having gainful employment, or paying off that government mortgage. What it is getting big government out of your life and returning it to the people. What's funny is none of them are citizens of Oregon. So they're going into Oregon telling Oregon what's good for them.
So if the federal government gave the western states surface rights to this particular land, as it once tried to do many years ago, do you think that would be enough in this case to satisfy these guys, or what do they really want?
I mean, man, you know what's going on in this country. If they got what they wanted here, then they'd find another place. If they got what they wanted here, it would embolden them to go other places. Remember, the guy in charge of this thing is the son of Cliven Bundy out in Nevada, who had an armed standoff in 2014 with the federal government. They walked away, and these guys are viewing that as a victory, so that's why you see them now. So no, I don't see it stopping here. I don't see the country calming down. I don't see Baltimore settling down. I don't see the border settling down. I don't see the rural West settling down. We got really big issues, and it's worth at least looking into these guys' minds, and that's what we tried to do here.
Charlie, thank you very much for your time.
You got it. Anytime.
Coming up, Fox News Chief Washington Correspondent James Rosen joins us with some surprises on the campaign trail, and we have some fun with our first State of the Show address.
Joe, what do you say? Make it happen.
Mr. Speaker, the President of Money, Power, and Politics, Craig Patrick.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Oh, we got a lot of work to do. Good job. Oh, we got a lot of work to do. Oh, we got a lot of work to do. I have so many people I'd like to thank. I'd like to thank our founding fathers who traveled more than 200 years in time to be here with us. And for this segment, I'd especially like to thank our director, Darren Johnson, for showing us how he did this same shtick last year with our sister station in Philly.
Michael Eugene Jury.
We can share ideas, take a premise that's been done before within our own organization, reboot it, and even call it The Force Awakens. We will also challenge conventional wisdom and call out politicians on both sides of the aisle. And I've placed a yellow note in each of your coat pockets that reveals what we have planned. And if you don't like the plan, try not to be called on, just avoid eye contact as much as you can. Last year, we launched a new show on the premise that you can mix serious political coverage with comedy, especially unintended humor from Vice President Biden.
I can tell you, and I've known 8 presidents, 3 of the minimum.
I like kids better than people.
Joe, what do you say? Make it happen. So I am proud to say the state of our show is strong. We will give important issues the time that they deserve. We will be serious. We will have fun. We will take chances. And in closing, we say, in the spirit of Ted Cruz and his amateur impressions,
Smithers.
Mike Lee, I am your father.
Upwards, not downwards, and always twirling for freedom.
Let me assert my firm belief we choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Aggression is defeated, the war is over. Well, as I said, good night, God bless you, and God bless America. Okay, so those were some silly impressions, and now it's time for some serious impressions of the president's vision and goals, and for that we have Fox News Chief Washington Correspondent James Rosen with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Craig.
The president said he could not bridge the partisan divide as he had hoped and planned. What at this point would it take for his successor to do it?
Well, it was interesting to hear the way the president framed that in the State of the Union address. He said it was one of the regrets of his presidency that this climate hadn't improved. It wasn't really an expression of an apology or any kind of acknowledgement of his own role in the worsening of the polarization under his term. Indeed, the rest of the State of the Union address might have helped explain why the polarization has deepened. The president himself said perhaps if he had been FDR or Roosevelt, he might have been able to do a better job of bridging the divide. In essence, he was saying, look, I'm not one of the greatest presidents of all time. Only if you set an impossibly high bar for me, should I be exempted here.
Now this question over Ted Cruz and his birth in Canada. What's the scuttlebutt or consensus in Washington? Is he in fact a natural-born citizen as the framers planned, qualified to be president?
The consensus amongst most of the commentariat, if you will, and probably most of the legal minds that have looked at this, is that it's a fairly uncomplicated question. If you're born to an American parent, wherever you are in the world, you're an American citizen.
James Rosen, thank you for your observations and for your time.
You bet.
Coming up, Evan Axelbank caught up with Defense Secretary Ash Carter in Tampa. And in Tallahassee, we'll unveil the winner of this week's edition of 60 Days of Stupid.
Some changes to talk about in the war on ISIS. Evan Axelbank caught up with our Secretary of Defense at CENTCOM.
On the heels of the president's insistence during his State of the Union that the war against ISIS is being won, at least in Iraq and Syria, his Secretary of Defense hit the road to make the same assertion. With polls showing nearly 2/3 of Americans disapprove of the president's handling of ISIS, Ash Carter stood next to top commanders at CENTCOM to say the effort is accelerating.
The military actions that General Austin, Chairman Dunford, and I recommended to the president have allowed the campaign to gather further momentum and to apply pressure to ISIL in Iraq and Syria.
He cites the takeover of Ramadi and the destruction of an ISIS cash hoard as proof and says the strikes have been buttressed by an emboldened Iraqi army. More Americans will be on the way to train them.
We are going to be doing more. Now, our operational approach is not to try to substitute for local forces, but to enable them to win.
But this is part of where ISIS gets tricky. General Austin, the head of CENTCOM, says in the face of defeat, ISIS could lash out in ways the terror group has become known for.
ISIL wants to draw attention away from the growing number of setbacks that he is experiencing.
The secretary says destroying ISIS in Iraq and Syria is a first step in hopefully showing potential terrorists that the movement has no future. When it comes to the battle for opinion, that is much more important than American poll numbers.
Thanks, Evan. Coming up, Governor Scott may want to rethink something on his Florida First Jobs Tour.
It's time now for 60 Days of Stupid.
Now it's time to start another State of the State speech, or as I would like to call it, a chance to show off my world-renowned oratorical skills. We have an ambitious agenda to keep Florida working and permanently eliminate the tax on manufacturing equipment. Manufacturing machinery equipment. On top of that, there will be $20 million in for technical centers. Mandatory minimum law.
While Governor Scott often stumbles on his words, there's one thing he usually nails.
Many of you know that my favorite three topics are jobs, jobs, and more jobs. I'm trying to grow the state by adding jobs. 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 People have jobs.
But this time he even muffed the optics on his All About Florida Jobs tour. He stressed it's all about investing in business right here in Florida. But we say he muffed the optics because he rolled out his Florida First tour with a bus from Tennessee.
Oh, gosh.
All right, follow us on Facebook. That's Fox 13's Craig Patrick on Facebook for much more. And we will join you once again next Sunday night at 11:30. Thank you so much for watching.